Hey, and welcome to Dancing in the Daily, a home for changemakers, caretakers, healers, and everyday community builders. Together, we are working to call in more love, joy, and connection into our world. I am so full right now. My dear Brittany Brady is joining us today in conversation. Brittany is an incredible strategist and advocate working to advance equity in education. Brittany's words and presence carry so much power. So you are in for a treat today, okay? Every time I hear Brittany speak, there's a fullness, right, and a strength that come to my heart. I walk away feeling better, robust, inspired, and so I know you're really going to appreciate her energy. Together, we will discuss wellness for Black women in nonprofit leadership and beloved community as a space of liberation. Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Such a lovely introduction. Thank you. I'm grateful for you.
Well, let's jump in. I really want to ground the conversation in your own story. Your story is very unique. When I first met you, immediately, like in the first conversation, I was like, this girl got it. Like, this girl got it. Whatever she wants to do in the world, she can do. You walk in this power. You walk in a knowing that is contagious. Okay. It's absolutely contagious. And I remember in our last conversation, I was just like, now, why education and why nonprofits, right? How did you come into this space? You could do anything you want in the world. You could be clocking in, bringing in all the money, participating in kind of the status quo if you so desired, right? And as a Black woman, you got to do your thing, honey. I get it. But I was so curious why you pursued education nonprofits and why you had this passion for liberation.
Yeah, first of all, my parents are very much community-minded people. And so growing up in church and seeing that view of community really made me certain that, like, if I have to labor for my resources, I don't want my labor or my energy to be in vain. And so I knew for sure that I wanted to work in a social impact space. You know, when I started off in education, some of the inequities that I saw really made me certain that, like, liberation was more of like the goal, right? Because so few people had embodied that practice, so few people were demonstrating that for young people. And so you have young people that are kind of like all over the place and unsure of themselves and unsure of the path to take forward. And it's like, I wanted to see them release themselves of that stricture, right? And so, like, the education space to me feels like fertile ground for possibility. And
Mm.
my mindset on community dovetails into that really nicely to say, like, with community comes possibility. And if we're all educated and coming together to really advance ourselves and to advance our collective, then liberation feels more full because we're aware of it. We're seeking it as a collective entity. And that's really in alignment with what I saw growing up. Now, church spaces aren't the most liberated spaces. And so I'll be transparent and say that. But that idea of coming together toward a common purpose, right? These people are showing up on weekends, evenings, to pour into the collective community, to pour into all of the children. And
Yes.
so what does that look like if we apply that same lens to how we grow more broadly, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's really what draws me to education, because it has that opportunity if we pull the levers in an intentional and thoughtful way.
Now, what did you see in your education experience? Maybe, thinking K through 12, but even thinking higher ed, that made you kind of stick and focus on equity in education? Because within education, there's a lot of different, lenses that you could view education from. So, what did you see in your kind of educational experiences, schooling experiences, that made you think, oh, I need to do something about equity in education?
Yeah, that's actually funny because I didn't immediately know it, right? I got into education being invested in, like, this is how we all progress together. And then I started to unearth some of the inequities that I was somewhat cognizant of, but hadn't had as my lived experience. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. It's predominantly and primarily Black, African American. And so a lot of my peers were, high achieving Black people. So this idea of we have to stretch to achieve wasn't something that I even resonated with. And so some of the inequities that I saw then across the board of being like, wait a minute, Black outcomes are lower than everybody else's. Like what? And it's not, I wasn't, oblivious, right? I won't act like I was just totally unaware, but it was so foreign based on my lived experience that I was like, oh no, I have to show up in these spaces because we're
Yes.
not going to say, oh, I don't know how to get Black boys in STEM. And my valedictorian and salutatorian from high school were both Black boys who went to MIT. I don't want to hear it. Inequities are structural, systemic, big, bold boulders that we have to move forward. And also, we can be thoughtful and intentional about how to slip around them and find the valleys and the nooks and the crannies to move ourselves forward as a collective. And so equity was something that my first role in truancy prevention kind of slipped me into.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, all of these people who are not in school are experiencing some dimension of difference. You have a learning difference. You have an undiagnosed disability. You have a chronic illness. You have the inability for your parents to have income, so you're working, right? You're going to tell me these are students that just don't want to come to school? No. They want to be at school. They would prefer to be at school than what many of them were dealing with, right? But no one had ever asked the question. They just sent paperwork home and said, hey, you're truant. Again, you're going to have to go to court. And they just get a court summons and they have no idea where it came from, right?
Yeah.
So that idea of lived experience of what do you mean this is not possible, which I think gets in the way of equity, right? People don't believe equitable outcomes are a radical imagination for some.
Okay.
And then secondly, experiencing the inequities firsthand of seeing students that were pushed out of the system and not invited in. And that's not to be unfair to educators. I want to be very clear about that because many of us are doing the best that we can with what we've been given. It's to say that the structures were not supportive of a safe and thoughtful reentry for many children, and it highlighted and exacerbated inequities they were already coming into the system with. And so it was just I threw up my hands, what? Something has to give, we have to do something different. And so just continued that throughout my career because we have to be able to imagine and believe something better.
I love this imagination. And earlier you talked about that fertile ground, education as a space for fertile ground. I want you to talk a little bit more about that idea of education as this kind of fertile ground. One thing that I love is that there's such a rich and radical tradition of resistance in Black education. Right. And you think some of our greatest leaders in the Black freedom movement, right, in the US were grounded in education. You think about Ida B. Wells, Septima Clark, right, Ella Baker, Shirley Chisholm, all of, just to name a few, right, all educators. Or started their careers as educators, right? And so talk to me a little bit more about education as a space for systems change. I know, there is a lot of hopelessness. I think a lot of people sometimes are like, there's no hope, for particularly public education, but, of course, there's education more generally. But how do you think about education as a space for systems change, but also as a space for community healing?
Oh, first of all, that's such a good question because it has such a positive frame to it. Because I do believe that education is a space where we can really shift those systems. And I love how it's grounded in that radical tradition of when we're given the tools to do what we know we're capable of, we can create the world we imagine and desire. And that is so in alignment with what our beloved ancestors called in, that I feel it's not a question of if I do the work, it's how and to what extent, right? And so something that's interesting in working in systems change work is that I came to it from doing very localized change work, right?
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, oh, the questions will be bigger, broader, different. And I'm ready, I'm pulling out my research and, dusting off old lenses and being like, okay, like, let me make sure like I'm ready for this space. And the most common thing is the questions about what's working locally for people, for promising practices to then permeate to different spaces or to scale up or whatever the case may be. And what I find intriguing about that is that's still community, right? Everybody
Yeah.
talks about systems. Oh, it's so big. No, there's people in these roles. There's humans that these numbers represent. And if
Yeah.
all of us would just talk to one another about what's working, what didn't work, if we embrace that vulnerability and transparency, that is actually how systems change. I truly believe it, right? Talking
Mm.
about that, like, kind of radical imagination and that, like, liberation as a politic and as a belief. I think a lot about Bell Hooks and what she taught us about community and love as a practice, right? It's something that I'm finding intriguing about being in in these spaces, especially education spaces, is that they're not devoid of love, right?
Mm.
No one is showing up in an education space that I've met saying, I want to be the problem that a student cites later on in their life. No one says that. Like, nobody wants to be in the rap song because of Miss Ward. Like, nobody wants to be that person, right? And so, because of that, it's like you have all of this love, and it's like it has nowhere to find root, right? You have all of
Mm.
this intention, but it's lacking that honesty and that self-reflection to balance it. And so when we think about systems changing, it's like, let love in the room.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
The system happens at a local level.
Yes. Yes.
And those two things, I think, really open up our minds to explore what could be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like, literally, oh, well, what did you learn from Colorado? What did you learn from California? What did you learn from? And it's like, had I known that, I would have done so many things, nothing really differently, but like, I would have taken more notes of what I did in terms of truancy interventions that was really effective. You just don't know
Mm-hmm.
what you're on to because the education space is so malleable and needs change so desperately that people are
Yeah.
like into any little thing like, oh, your outcomes improved by 15%. Let me try it. They're
Yeah.
ready. They're
Yes.
willing. But so few people are wanting to take a risk that might hurt someone, that it's like, no, let's not be too ambitious with our goal setting. Let's just increase by 5%, even if we believe students can achieve 15% higher. Or
Mm-hmm.
those students are already experiencing so much harm. So let's lower the bar for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we
Mm-hmm.
think about equity, we need to think about how do we match expectations with support instead of how do we limit expectations, right?
Yes. Yes.
Lowering
Yes.
expectations for me is not inviting equitable outcomes. It is
Mm-hmm.
demeaning and it's extending pity to me that I did not ask you for.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, to be more equitable, we should offer ourselves the opportunity to say, what does a stretch of the imagination look like in this space? And if we
Mm-hmm.
don't reach it, what do we miss? What do we gain? Right? And being honest about that.
Yeah. 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 I am in love with this, this idea of the on the ground at the local level, right? Systems change happening at the local level. And I immediately resonate with that because in my time as a preschool teacher, for me, like that, those are the shining moments of my life, and everything else I do is connected to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think there was a power and an intense love that you described that you could feel working with one child at a time. Being in that classroom and having just a, handful of children around. It was those moments where you could feel literally, like tangibly, right? Like the change happening. And to me, that's a superpower that not just educators, but anybody who is doing grassroots work in community, whether it's in education, whether it's in restorative justice or health systems, like when you're doing that human to human work, that is the power. And yet we live in systems and narratives that tell us that that's not the power. The power is at the top only, right? We know it's only there, right? And you are an amazing leader. How can leaders create systems that actually remind folks who are doing that beautiful on the ground work of their power, and that actually create space to bring in and leverage their power and leverage those voices? How can we design systems that really value the folks who are doing the work on the ground?
I would say, first of all, thank you. Leadership is such a unique thing because I don't believe in hierarchy. I think it's something that we've made up to lord over others that I really have a natural resistance to. And so it's interesting to have hierarchical power over anyone else from me because I don't believe in it, but I know that it exists, right? I'm not demeaning it or diminishing the very real nature of power. However, with that being said, I think that the biggest thing is co-creation, right? There are no big I's and little U's in this universe. And so I think that leaders who want to build equitably and sustainably have as many people at the table as possible. And this doesn't mean that everybody is, going to share, because power dynamics exist. And if you're the leader putting forth the idea or the plan for how you all are going to be structured, then that has a level of expectation attached to it. But I would say calling out the power dynamics that are at play, co-creating what you all's norms are. I used to strive for a flat organization, and then I realized that people use the term flat organization to diminish when they lord over others, and so I resisted that one too. And instead said, how can we have a free-flowing organization where decisions and communication flow effortlessly throughout all tributaries of the organization, right? Thinking more in terms of that, those reminders from nature, right? Leaning into that ancestral wisdom has been a big piece of my leadership. And I will also encourage leaders to lean on that within themselves and from their teams while co-creating those norms together. Because every place has a system, right? Every place has a culture. Every place has goals and expectations aligned with whatever work you're carrying out. How you go about doing that is within the alleged power of the leader. And so if you are really wanting people to stick around and do their best and most ideal work for themselves, what are you moving out of the way? What are you adding to the queue to make sure that people are able to show up in that way? And how are you developing systems to sustain that, right? And then lastly, I would say agile systems, because people change, their needs change, right?
Yes.
We do a lot of work with disability inclusion and disability justice. And something that I think about that a lot of folks in the disabled community say is like everybody is one instant away from being disabled, right? And so being mindful of how that shows up. And so what's true for one of my team members today may not be true for them tomorrow, right? Something can happen. Their abilities can shift. So how do my systems stretch? How nimble are they to be able to catch people when they fall, to be able to be mindful of the humanity of all folks involved? And how frequently can we reimagine and refine that process, right? So also engaging in constant improvement, I would say, would be part of it. That's part of that nimble factor. Like, okay, Brittany, we tried this out, but it's really not working for us in this way. Okay, well, let's try that, right?
Now, what gets in the way of that, right? Because we see within the social impact sector, like really well-intentioned, well-meaning folks, and I'll include myself in that, similar to you, I was, I want to do a flat organization, right? And then, really encountered some very real struggles in wanting to share power, because recognizing the people that myself, it was a new experience of sharing power. And then also the people that I hired, also it was a new experience of sharing power. So there were moments where like, I want to lean on, kind of the old way of doing things. And that co-creation process came with some discomforts as well, right? And I recognize in myself as a leader, I could either shut down or I can lean in, right? And sometimes we choose to lean in, sometimes we kind of choose to shut down. What, in your own career, right? Have there been any moments where you've kind of been challenged with, you had a vision or you had an idea, or maybe you had a set of values, but it's not really working out like that? And how did you kind of move through that experience?
Yeah, I'm a funny person in that my dad would say she doesn't move from her mark. There's certain things that I just don't move from, and it has given me different consequences in different spaces, right? But I'm thinking of a time where I had a colleague I was working with. Some would say direct report. I'm like, okay, whatever. I guess I'm your manager, like whatever, And
Yeah.
this person that was higher up wanted this person to do a project
Mm-hmm.
and was like adamant, like they're not responding to me. I need them to this. I need them to that. Meanwhile, they weren't communicating in the way that I had already established with this person that I primarily collaborate with. And so I said, well, you should probably talk to me about engaging. Again, one of those, like, sometimes you just can't have a flat organization. Reason one is because some people are obsessed with power and control. And so they feel like they want to dominate over someone else. And so sometimes you have to show up in that power to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so back to the story. So I want this person to do this project, they're not responding. And so I found out that they weren't communicating their needs, right? Not in the way
Yes.
that we established and not in a way that I could even understand. So now I come in, I intervene, and I say, hey, obviously we want to get this project done. What can we do all collaboratively to work together to, figure it out?
Mm-hmm.
The person that was asking for this project then gets upset, says that I'm taking it over, and that
Mm.
they didn't appreciate, and that I'm allowing my folks that I work with to disrespect them.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now we're disrespected. Now I'm helping the little people rise, and now I'm all of a sudden a rabble rouser of some sort. And
Yes.
so, looking back on that whole experience, in hindsight, I should have picked up the phone and called the person that was upset, right? Even if I wasn't in alignment with what they were angry about, I could have called and I could have asked and said, like, what exactly is the rub here? Because the project's still going to get done. So what's
Yes.
the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I know that for some folks, Black women showing up in their power and authority is really disruptive to their psyche.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not to say that I'm showing up in
Just
a way
bothered,
that's like,
honey. Just
you need
bothered.
to say this, you need to, like, that's never going to be me because that's not the way this world works. And so I know
Yeah.
I can't show up in that way. But
Yeah.
also, that's not in my character. The same way that I'm engaging with you right now, you've seen me a million times. Have you not?
Yeah.
Am I not the
Yes.
same way day in and day out? Right. And so I'm
Yes.
not changing for anybody, especially not someone who doesn't really know my true character. And
Yeah.
so when we think about, how to really adopt a mindset of a leader that really sees people and gets past these little disruptions, it's calling out ego and
Yes.
understanding that that always has a blowback.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also
Mm-hmm.
remaining unflappable in your values. Because even though I wish I would have picked up the phone and called, I wouldn't have changed anything about advocating for my team member. Why?
Yes.
Because no one around me is going to lord over someone, dominate someone, oppress someone, not while I have breath in my body. It's not happening.
Mm.
Not on my watch. And not
Yes.
while I can see it. Now, if I'm not proximal and I can't do nothing about it, then it is what it is. But you're not going to do it in front of my face.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
again, back to that ancestral wisdom, I think of all the time that our ancestors wish they could have said something and they couldn't, and they would have lost their lives for it.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
moment that I can, I'm going to lean in. And I'm going to do it with grace and love and conviction in my heart.
Yes.
But I'm going to say what they couldn't because you need to hear it in the here and now. So you don't behave that way, and so we can get better as human beings to one another. Because that's what it's grounded in. It's not in calling somebody out. I don't have time to call people out. I want to keep myself looking slim and trim for the rest of my life. You're not about to stress me out and add stress to my body. But I will call you in and invite you to reflect on your own behavior and offer you a few reflection questions for you to think about in your quiet moments if you have any.
Oh my goodness, that's so good. That's so good because ego is such a real thing, again, in the world, in all of our personal journeys, and certainly in the social impact sector. And I love what you say about calling folks in and offering those questions for questions for reflection, because we all have that, right? Like, we're all going to have moments where we're going to say, hey, what was going on that day? What was going on in that conversation? And communication is especially an area where we really can see on display, maybe some of the insecurities, maybe some of the anxieties, maybe some of the fears, maybe some of the old narratives, right, that come up and show up through ego. And so thank you for sharing, that story, because I think, one, it reminds us that we can say something and we can do something. And I want to just send so much love to everyone who might be having a moment of fear and silencing themselves. I know what that feels like when you try to pay the rent and you might be, whatever might be happening in life where that might silence you. There are all kinds of fears that could silence someone. So sending love to those folks, and also sending love and power that in the smallest moments, right? Like, you can say something. And those are the moments of transformation. When we say something, when we ask a question, when we pause, right? Like, systems change isn't only about the policy, right? It's also about those moment to moment interactions, right? Where we're calling each other in and reflecting together.
Exactly. Systems change when people do.
Yes, systems change when people do. Tell me more about that. Systems change when people do.
It's people in these roles, right? Back to what I was talking about with the ambitious outcomes. It's, am I going to lose my job if I don't meet this metric? And if so, then I'm not going to stretch. I'm not going to think more broadly. And that is no shame, shade, nothing to the people in these roles at all. But we are not supported systemically in stretching and thinking differently, right? There's funding associated. There's jobs associated. There's so much wrapped up in what's in the brains of these little humans.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to them, but it's how the system is structured. And so if people would think more holistically, and people hate that word now, it's like, oh, it's everybody's so touchy-feely. Everybody's, and it's like, yes, we survived a global pandemic. We're still here. And maybe people want to get a little bit closer to one another, right? And so if we had different metrics for student success, if you have a percentage increase this year and everybody gets to keep their job, even if it's 1%, 10%, 12%. What if that was the system? You grew this year. Good job. And that's not lowering expectations again, but it's saying, let's go ahead and set some ambitious goals. And let's support one another in taking risk.
Yes.
And if no one meets the metric, then that means we need to look at something different. It doesn't mean that the metric was too ambitious. It means that we're out of alignment with how people learn and how people perform. Yes. And that's been very true for a long time in education.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you're talking about bringing humanity to the work that we do. The workforce, especially in education, is incredibly dehumanized. And just think about the narratives again of teachers and of principals. It's like we put these people in these boxes, and human beings are not robots, right? So one question that's just coming to me now is actually thinking about care in education. Now, it's funny to me because there's always this idea of like, in educators, like, I'm not a babysitter. I'm not a babysitter. Or sometimes you have parents who say teachers, they're just babysitters, right? And for me, that has always been incredibly disturbing, because I just thought to myself, like, a huge part, like, people should take pride in the care that they give children, not only in the education that they deliver, but in the community, the home, the care that they create with and for children. Like, that is a part of the work. And I think when we think about like technology and education, right, and AI and all these things, it's like, to me, it's like, sure, we leverage the technology when we can, and recognize this unique and special role that human beings play, which is the care, which is the communication, the connection, the community, right? How do you think about the role and value of care within education?
Well, first of all, I think that care is devalued because care is seen as women's work. And so more globally, we demean that and devalue it because it's like, oh, that's for the women to do. And so that's why teachers feel like they have to distance themselves from the paraprofessionals or from the babysitter or the nanny. Like, no, I got a degree for this, right? It's that need to feel superior, in my opinion. And again, that's not on the teacher. That's on the system that makes you think that you have to distance yourself. When in reality, I know a lot about what I know about children from babysitting. From Sunday school, from being the auntie cousin homegirl friend that's coming to pick up your babies when you can't. From being that person is what has really shaped me. All of everybody I'm Auntie BB to, they've taught me so much, right? And so I've never felt a need to distance myself, but I also am very comfortable in my skin and in my lived experience. And I honor those that are coming into that understanding for themselves. With that being said, it's part of the problem because we are trying to remove the care to add rigor, and you don't access rigor until you've offered care.
Mm.
And so it's like, all right, your students are performing and you're setting high expectations, but you don't know anything about them. Or you don't know that, oh, wait, they had a major event at the school last weekend and the kids were wondering if you were going to be there and you weren't because you had something else to do.
Right.
Teachers do a lot, but also that care. Will you show up
Yes.
for me when I ask? Right? Can I
Mm-hmm.
trust that you'll do what you say you will? Are you fair? Are you honest? Are you consistent? All of those are elements of care that people act like aren't, but they are. And those are very tangible things for people that might not emote in like a warm, fuzzy, friendly way like you and I do, for them to extend care to others. But since we have distanced ourselves from care being seen as a value that we should all possess, and instead of something that those girls over there, those women over there do, we've lost the plot. Because
Mm-hmm.
teaching is caregiving, just like teaching is mentoring, just like teaching is actually educating, just like teaching is challenging. It's a skill and a field that possesses so many things that I think we do ourselves a disservice by acting like we're only one thing. No, we're everything. I have
Yes.
so many students that call me mama. I just had one that messaged me this morning, mama, this is me. I know, baby. And I will always be glad to be one of your 27 mamas. I'm proud to be one of those,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Now, I want to zone in and on you, okay? And how you have cultivated this confidence in who you are and the work that you do. I don't want to take that for granted because I know, even in my own journey, and I would say most of my life, I'm pretty confident, but certainly in my work as an early childhood educator and in my work as a nonprofit leader, when I first, decided to pursue this career, I had a lot of insecurity. So, a lot of my family was like, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor. And when I went into education, they were like, people were like, I had mentors and everybody who was like, don't do this to yourself. Why are you letting yourself down? You're letting us down. So most of my 20s, I had some incredible insecurities, right? Even though in my heart, like I could feel love and I could feel this divine presence, like calling me into this work. So that kept me going. But, I did feel the need to like prove myself and prove my worth and prove my value because I was someone who wanted to do community work. Can you speak to just like how did you cultivate it and sustain? How do you continue to sustain your sense of self and your assuredness as you do this social impact work or this work with and for community?
Well, first of all, thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability, because I'm sure that's going to free someone up. And I'm glad that you're freed up from that weight of that level of expectation, because it's so clear that this is the work that you're called to do and that you're good at and that it's so natural and intuitive for you. And that's what I want for everybody. And so really that's the answer, right? My desires for equity and education are tied in with my desire for all people to be well. I think that if we were all seeking to show up as ourselves authentically and consistently, that we would be so self-actualized that society would just move forward, right? And I know that's a very utopian way of being, and I live in that space in my mind, and I'm happy to share that I do, because I have to believe that it's possible, right? And you know, I've been grappling with the word confident for some time because people say like, oh, like, you're so confident. And if someone said describe yourself, confident would not be one of the words that I use. And it's not because I lack confidence, but it's because it's just, I'm showing up as me, right? And I know that I can't be anybody else. And so I have to really embrace all of my many sides, right? I've spent a lot of time embracing my shadowy parts, embracing the sides of myself that I was hiding from or that I was resistant to embrace, right? I spent a lot of time reflecting on the ways that I might show up in mask to make myself seem like I have it together and what that really means for me and why I'm doing it, right? And so to me, it's kind of like what people call confidence comes after that work. And that work is messy and hard and heavy. And it's tears in my spouse's arms. And it's explaining to my baby, mommy needs a moment right now. Because I have to be honest with myself so I can be honest for myself, for one, and then for them, right? Because I want to be who my spouse fell in love with. I want to be who my son believes his mother is. And I want to feel good in my skin. And so confidence for me and like kind of walking in this social impact space, I know that when someone asks me what I do, I want to be able to riff. I want to be able to get excited about it. I want to be able to talk about it ad nauseum, right? And so I was also one of those people that's like, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor. And all I hear is like, you want to make money. And yes, of course, I welcome more resources. I would love to make a lot of money, but I also want to make a big impact, right? I think that my role as a future ancestor is one that I take seriously and one that I think about every single day. My ancestors have opened up so many doors for me that I hope if I can even open up half of those doors for whoever's coming behind me, we're better off than we were when I got here earthside. And for me, that matters more than any dollar, any cent, anything. Because if we're all doing what we're called to do, we all get better collectively. Or even if we don't all get, we all see, hey, wait, what am I called to, right? Am I called to create art? Am I called to educate? Am I called to lead? Am I called to be a lawyer because I love reading contracts? My best friend loves reading contracts. The most bizarre thing, I was like, please go to law school. Like, it's so obvious, it's in your face, but it took a while for that to click. Like,
That's right.
That fits, right?
Yes, that's right.
And part of confidence is embracing the circuitous nature of our stories, right? I've always been confident in the path. I have not always been confident in my footing, and that's okay. People need to embrace that truth for themselves, to feel better and to feel more honest and more human. Nobody has it all together. Not me, not you, not nobody. Not even the person you're thinking about when you think they must have it all together.
Yeah.
But being confident in your humanity, that's easy. That's simple. I'm human. I'm going to get it wrong, and I'm going to tell you I got it wrong, and I'm going to try better next time, and that's okay.
Yes. Oh, goodness. Girl, you are such a gift. You are such a gift, a gift, a gift, a gift. And listen, I love when you say future ancestor, and I feel it. I see it. Oh, my goodness. How beautiful. How beautiful is your energy. I want to talk to you about well-being and how you care for your own well-being. How do you care for your own well-being? Because you are doing some powerful, critical work. So how do you take care of yourself in that process?
I have a long list, so thanks for asking. And thank you for your kindness. You're just always such an easy person to talk to because of your warmth, and it just always is just, it's also infectious, it fills you up, and it's like, yeah, I do want to talk about that, That's the vibe, and so I appreciate that. I was recently at a conference, and they asked this question of everybody in the room. They pre-selected my conference sessions, which is always funny, and one of the sessions was on like taking care of yourself as a leader, and I was like, oh, I love that, right?
Yes.
And I got in the room, and people were saying things like, oh, I don't know the last time I read a book, or I don't know the last time I took a long shower, or I don't have any wellness practices. I don't have any time. I'm normally sending emails until 2:00 in the morning. And I put out my little list because I was just writing.
You said, ask for me.
And it's not to diminish what those other folks were sharing, but it's to say, one, leaders are not encouraged to be well. It's not something that they tell you need to do.
That's right.
It's told to you like you need to hold space for your team, make sure they're taking care of themselves. But if you're not modeling that as a leader, I can guarantee you your team's not doing it either.
Yeah.
So second to that, some of my favorite wellness practices, I'm a therapy evangelist. I'm a firm believer in engaging in like therapeutic spaces. So shout out to my therapist. You earn your money every month. And I'm grateful to her and for her wisdom and her wit. I have a very funny therapist. And I also am big on meditation. I think I've shared that with you. So I meditate and I share my meditative practice weekly with those that I'm in community with, just to kind of remind them, like, we always can take time to reground ourselves. And then it's interesting thinking about practices. So I was gardening at the beginning of the pandemic and I had some really beautiful harvests. And then I got stressed and busy and it went along the wayside. I'll be honest. And so when you leave gardens unattended, they overgrow and it's very, very difficult to get them back under control. And there's a lesson in wellness there, right? The untended parts of my garden that I thought were already okay because I did the practice, so it's done. And then it gets overgrown and you have to find your way back to the practice, right? So recently my spouse took 4 men to clear my garden out. He said, let's get it ready for the new year, right? That's love and practice to me, right? And so gardening is another one of those. And then spending time, of course, with family and friends. I'm a big, like, let's kiki on FaceTime about, Real Housewives. Like, that's really the vibes. And, just having a good time. And then I love singing and music. So I do songwriting with a group of women.
I did not know that about you.
I sang in a jazz band all through college. So it's really something that I really thoroughly enjoy and that I've been getting back into in the past couple of years. Again, like revisiting things that brought you peace and solace in a different season of your life. That's the exploration piece for us in this moment, right? If you're distant from your wellness practice, what did you used to do? Just look at decades when you were 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to whatever. What brought you joy in that moment? And just try out a couple of things to get you started, because we are essentially gaslit out of our humanity in this moment in time.
That's right.
That it's not worth it. It's not, I think about the Nat ministry a lot. And I'm like, if you're the Nat bishop, I'm definitely a Nat minister. Okay. I'm part of the church. I am definitely in the diaconate ministry of the Nat ministry.
Yes.
And I think about in her comment section, people are like, oh, it must be nice for you to be able to take a nap. It must be nice for you to take a sabbatical. And the things that she's recommending are not earth shattering, Erica. Close your eyes for 20 minutes and set an alarm. 20 minutes, you can't imagine 20 minutes of quiet and stillness. We are not well.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And so that is honestly where all these wellness practices stem from for me, was me getting still, embracing meditation as a practice, and hearing my own mind be like, don't you have more to do? And when I confronted that voice and said, I'm always going to have more to do, I found stillness. I found peace. I found that reminder that stretching yourself thin, overexerting yourself, overextending yourself is not going to get the job done. You can do all of those things and still not get the outcomes you desire.
That's right.
And so instead, what can I conserve to keep just for me and those that I love?
Yeah.
And also, what wellness practices do I need to employ to make sure I stay there in spite of external circumstances? That's something that I pray for all the time. Peace in spite of external circumstances. I want that peace my grandmothers had. You have 13 kids, I would be stressed to the max. I'd be like, 13 kids? Where are my babies? What are they doing? What's happening? My grandmother used to sit right in the room, hey, baby, and keep right on about her business, not worried about a thing. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
I said, I want that peace. Grandma's going to be in the house. You know what it's going to get. You know that. I'm happy to offer that to people, and I hope that I always can. When you call me, oh, what's Brittany doing? Oh, she's just kikiing with her Erics. Yes, she is.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, I know that you're a phenomenal mentor and coach, right? For many other Black women doing amazing change-making work. I've been able to meet some of the folks that you mentor. And so I'm curious, what have you been noticing, right? In terms of, and I mean, it could be folks that you mentor, it could also be peers, right? When we think about Black women who are Black women change makers, right, who are doing work in various parts of the social impact sector, what are you seeing? What do you think some, Black women are kind of struggling with within the social impact sector? But also, what is our special sauce that you've noticed, right? What's our gift to the world?
Ooh, we have so many, and I'm so grateful. All of my mentees, they'll say like, "Can you mentor me?" And I'm like, "Is that what we're doing? Like, we're friends, you know? Like, we're just getting to know one another." But they do call when they're having stressful times, especially at work or school or whatever season they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I'm noticing is consistent across the board: not being seen.
Mm-hmm.
Not being seen. Um, and it's not even just not being seen, but being expected to show up in a certain way. And so you're not seeing me, but you're seeing who you wanted me to be. I see this a lot. I am extroverted. I'm very clearly extroverted, but I have some mentees and sister friends who are introverts. And something that really deeply, deeply disrupts me is when they share like, "Oh, if I don't show up as the big bold ha 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 Black girl, then I'm seen as angry or distant or difficult." And to me, what that comes across is as not being seen. You're not able to be quiet. You're expected
Yes.
to perform. And ironically, that goes across the board, even to the extroverted side of the spectrum. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
if you're over the top, then when I'm liking you, it's fun and it's a good time. When I'm not liking you, you're arrogant and hard to manage and difficult to get along with,
Yes.
right? That pet to threat scenario is ongoing, and it's really dangerous for all sectors, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of what I know about Black women, which is oftentimes when I get into a meeting, I look and I see who's the Black woman on the staff there.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see what her experience is, because you know what I've noticed. One, that's where the labor is often concentrated. She's working 6 jobs, everybody else is working 3. It's social impacts. Everybody's working more than one. Somehow, she has more, you know. And then in addition to that, no support, no community, which is how I'm walking around. My spouse is like, "Brittany, if you get another mentee, I swear." And I'm like, "Well, what am I supposed to say? Like, if they call me, I'm gonna answer." And he knows this about me. He loves it, you know. But it's like, because there's no community, right? I was part of this group in Dallas called the Black Women in Nonprofit Leadership Cohort, and it's one of
Mm-hmm.
the only spaces of its kind that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
It's currently led by a nonprofit called Connections Multiply 2, and within that cohort is like leadership development, support, etc. What I learned from that cohort and from my mentees is that we're in trouble. We're having horrible health and emotional wellness outcomes, depression, anxiety, rampant,
Mm-hmm.
unfair and unrealistic expectations about our performance, rampant, being ostracized and yet expected to fawn, rampant. But also, we're finding these spaces of solace with one another and also with allies. I will not diminish allies, because I've had some beautiful, beautiful allies emerge from me in spaces before that have offered me care. But also, we shouldn't be requiring care in this scenario. It's great that care exists, but we shouldn't have to get it because of how much harm we're experiencing. And yet, so many of my mentees, hurt upon hurt upon hurt. I mean, people witnessing them have racist incidents and not saying anything. I mean, like vintage racism, like, "You can't come in through this door here."
You said vintage
White
racism.
colleagues just sitting by, like, "Oh, wow, that's tough to be." Like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's hard and it's bad and it's heavy, and I'm grateful for them entrusting me with relationship. And also, I wish that I could get Mackenzie Scott money tomorrow and hire every single one of them and just change the world, because I know
That part.
I could with all of them, right? Like, the gifts are so plentiful and so massive. Like, it's not a matter of what we could do, it's what can't we. right?
Yes, yes,
Like,
yes.
you know how they always say, like, oh, like Black women, we all we got. And I always say, and thank God we're enough. Like, stop
Yes,
acting like we need everybody else coming to rally around for our causes when we have each other and we know we're keeping all of this running. Let's
that's
grow
right.
with each other and see what we
Yes.
can make happen. And things get more
Mm-hmm.
beautiful that way. Things get richer that way. What do they say? The only thing we had to lose is our chains, but so many of us are still in them.
That's right.
And we don't know
That's
that we
right.
like the way they look, but I encourage you to see what you look like without them. It gets better here. It's more
Mm-hmm.
liberated here. It's freer here. And it's worth it.
Mm.
But we have to believe.
Ah, oh my goodness. So my last question to you is perfect, actually following what you said, is I would love for you to kind of paint me a picture of a social impact sector that can actually foster liberation, right?
Oh,
And I would like you to paint me this picture through the lens of a Black woman specifically, right? What does it look like to have a change making community, right? What are the programs and resources that exist? What are the strategies and frameworks being utilized? What are the practices? What's the language, the stories being told in this social impact sector where we can experience and co-create liberation, and especially again through the lens of a Black woman?
mm. That's a beautiful picture to paint. And like my mind is like sputtering in all these different directions. Like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And so the first thing will be that we're proximal. We're not spending money on big offices and big buildings. We're spending money
Mm-hmm.
on the actual impact of the community. The community says they need a community center. We're rallying the funds. We're building it. We have an architect from the community. We have programming from the community. Everything is homegrown and grassroots. And then secondly, talent. I cannot emphasize this enough. Social impact does a horrible job of maintaining and retaining talent. So
Mm-hmm.
people are compensated equitably. There is room for people to develop in their gifts. There is no expectation that if you're a director, then that means you have to travel 25% of the time. And if you're not a director, that means no, it means everybody gets to work to their strengths and we figure out how that advances the collective mission that we share.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would also say, I cannot emphasize this enough, that those that we're supporting, clients, students, whomever, they are guiding what the work looks like. I think Black women do this really well of active listening and listening to understand instead of listening to respond. And I think that that is what the sector looks like. There's a lot of posturing and saviorism that happens in the space. That is eliminated and it is not tolerated. Anyone, donor, corporation, institution, anyone with that posturing is asked to not continue to move forward until they go through some level of training and redevelopment of their skill and their approach. Again, we're not banishing anyone because we're Black women and we know what that feels like. And so we give you the opportunity for repair. And I would say that's also something that would be intrinsic within the space is a co-creation of solutions so that no one feels like the one that is helping and the one that's receiving the help, but instead it's a free flow of energy for everybody to be seen as valuable in the exchange. I
Mm.
think that's what it looks like.
Ah, yes, I am swimming and just abiding, okay, in this beautiful picture. I'm literally your words. Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you again, not only for everything that you do, but absolutely all that you are. Your presence, your energy. Again, I know I've said this a million times and I'll keep on saying it, is such a gift. So thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you. It's been a beautiful conversation to have, and I'm going to meditate on that. Like, what does this space look like? Grounding in the radical imagination. That's one of my wellness practices, too. Like,
Yes.
what does the world I'm seeing in my brain look like? How can I mentally will it closer to us? So, yeah.
Yes. Now, before you go, I do want to, ask you, like, is there a way for folks to connect with you? Is there, I know that again, you're always doing something, whether it's writing, exploring, mentoring, connecting, speaking at the next conference. So how can people connect with you and support your work and support your vision, align with your vision?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is really that girl. Everybody's on LinkedIn. So my name is Brittany Brady on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect via that platform. And if you're interested in kind of my wellness practices and especially my meditations, those go live on Instagram, good old fashioned Instagram. And the handle for that is ask, two underscores, my initial BHB, and then two more underscores. So ask BHB. And then you'll see all of them. There's like 120 or something like that, I think. And some folks that meditate with me just like kind of scroll and pick one, which is actually a fun practice. Sometimes I do that, but I mainly did it because guided meditations are a nice way to kind of ease into the practice of meditation. So I would say those are both the best ways.
Oh my goodness. Well, make sure you do that, everyone. You will be blessed and gifted from that. Again, thank you, Brittany, and I'm excited to connect again. We'll have to do this again.
Yes, we will. This was great. Thank you.